Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are finally going to start on the vent system that I've been talking about since video 1 on this channel. And we're going to start piecemeal, unfortunately, hooking up the H2C. I've got some ABS up here drying, or was drying. It's just sitting here enjoying the dry climate inside the Solvol filament dryer. And I want to be able to start printing with it. So the H2C having a chamber heater takes priority over the P2S as far as getting the vent system hooked up. So let me get some things arranged, get the bench cleaned off and get the parts over there. I'll bring you in close. I'll go over the parts I've got, what my plan is going to be, and then we'll actually get started on it. Okay, some of this is going to be a repeat, but I'm just going to quickly go over the parts I've got printed up and kind of go over what my plan is real quick and concisely, or try to be concise, as concise as I'm capable of, which some of you may already realize is not very, but we're going to go over the parts to the vent system. This piece right here has magnets in the back, and then it just screws to the back of the machine using 2 existing mounting holes and screws that are already there, basically mounting the back plate of the machine to the interior purge chute. So you mount that on there, and then there are corresponding magnets on the back of this piece, and then when you put it up there, it has alignment pins that you can see here, and there are holes in here that match those alignment pins, and it just basically self-aligns and holds itself on there. So this piece you can easily take on and off while this piece stays mounted to the machine. Nice clean use of that. And the reason I wanted this is I needed an enclosure. I needed to close up the hole that is the purge chute on the back of the machine, because the exhaust fan is going to create a negative pressure inside the machine, so that none of the VOCs that are printed when you print some of the more volatile materials escape through any cracks or anything if you have a positive or neutral pressure inside the machine. So I'm going to use my exhaust fan to create a negative environment, and I needed to close up that big hole. So this mounts to the back of the machine, and off the back of this we'll have a 2-inch hose. This is one of them I've got. I've got another one that's already mounted to the H2C. I'll show you when we get over there. But it mounts to that, and then it goes down to this Y. That will be setting, oh, not that Y, this Y. That'll be setting under the machine on that bottom shelf, and the 2-inch hose coming off of that purge chute will then come down and mount here. Then this other side, you may be wondering, why do I have a 4-inch opening on the other side? That will go to the 4-inch hose that will eventually be mounted here, will go over to the fan, and eventually, not today, but eventually, I will be using this Y adapter coming off, 4-inch hose coming off the fan, and then one hose will be going over to the H2C, another hose will be coming over to the P2S. But like I said in the previous clip, the P2S is not a priority because it does not have a heated chamber. So most of the higher temperature materials that are more likely to produce the VOCs will be printed in the H2C because it does have a chamber heater. And the chamber heater will help keep the interior of the printer warm enough that those materials will not warp. So it's the priority to set up, so this piece will be saved for another day. Now this piece, originally I'd planned to mount it on top of a 5-gallon bucket, and it would set down in this, like that. You notice all the mounting holes here. I also printed a bottom flange that would go on the underside of the lid of the 5-gallon bucket, and I put heat press inserts in here. There's a video on that where I made the heat press insert press. Whew, say that 5 times fast. And inserted these heat press inserts in. That would mount on the inside. I would cut out a hole large enough to fit this inner diameter here. Mount this on the bottom, drill small holes in that, put this on the outside and mount, and just run some, I think these are M3 screws or M4s. I'd have to check it again. But that would be held together with M3 and M4 or M4 screws. And then if you can see, I don't know if my lighting is good enough. There you go. You can see there's a flange down inside that, a lip. Yeah, well, that's showing, yeah, that's showing up pretty good. There's a lip right in there. And on that lip keeps this from sliding down any further than that. So that would sit on top of the bucket. Purge will come down into this hole through the 2-inch hose off the back of the machine, fall down in the bucket, and then the fan will suck air through this side and therefore be sucking air through this hose out of the machine. And I've got my fan has variable speeds, so I can turn it way down. I just want enough airflow to keep negative pressure inside the machine, but no more. Just barely keep a negative pressure in the machine to pull the VOCs out. But if I pull too much air, it'll defeat the purpose of having the chamber heater and keep the interior of the machine too cold to print the high temperature materials. So it's going to be a balancing act. And if I can't get the fan low enough, I will also install a blast gate between the fan and this connection here. But we'll have to see how it sets up and gets everything going. All right, that's the 3D printed parts, other than, well, it's all the parts I'm going to use today other than the fan. Oh, well, yeah, one more thing. Like I said, originally I was going to put this on a 5-gallon bucket, but I've changed course and we're going to be using, scrap 1-gallon tin can, and this is all the purge out of the H2C so far. And so I printed this collar that just basically sits down on top of that, and then this sets in there. Now, I'm not too worried about air leaks on this side of the fan because this is all going to be a negative pressure. So if anything, it'll pull air into the system. So I won't have any VOC leakage. The only place I will be using clamps, unless I absolutely need them, will be on the downstream side of the fan, between the fan and the exhaust, because I want those sealed up as tight as I get them, because that's going to have positive pressure on it, and I don't want it pushing VOCs out into the room until it gets outside. So that's basically all the parts I've got. We'll regroup here in a second and start installing. Okay guys, not gonna lie, the rest of this video is probably going to be a lot of awkwardness of me trying to find good shooting angles to put the camera to film what I'm going to be doing. So I've got you over here in the corner, well, corner of our shelves here. The P2S is right here, and the H2C is on the other end of the shelf, so this is the printer shelf right here. The exhaust is right up here above. I think it's out of frame, but this is where the exhaust will hook up. I've already got a 4-inch line hooked to it. Now I've got to figure out where I'm going to put the fan, because I haven't got that nailed down just yet. I've got some ideas, and I'm just going to try and work through it here on video and see where we're going to go. My first thought is to mount the fan here, cut this hose here, put it on top, and just leave that, mount it right here on the back. The only reason I'm not too keen on that idea, and really the only downside to that, is it does block this access right here, because I can squeeze through here if I need to get to the back of the printers. Because otherwise I have to come in from the other side, and the other side has the plugs mounted on the wall at about this height, right there where I would be coming through. So that access is already semi-blocked. So if I block this side too, then it's going to make it much more awkward for me to get in and do any servicing on the rear. The other option I have is to come down below. Oh, goodness, I've got it out of frame. Anyway, this shelf that the printers are setting on, I can come down below it and mount it on the underside of this plywood here, with it, the outlet facing here or even towards the rear. And well, logistically mounting it with the inlet of the fan facing this way so I could take the hose and go right under there with it is probably the best bet. One thing, it'll be easier to mount to the underside of the plywood with just a few wood screws and some washers than it would be to rig something to mount into these slots on here, which is an option. And I can always 3D print something. Hey, I've got 3D printers, that's a possibility. But again, blocking this area over here is not the greatest. Another option, and one that'll be a little more logistically involved, is to try and mount the fan here on the end. There's no good mounting options here, so I'd have to rig something or print something, design and print something to go here to do that with. Then I can run the hose up here where I can get under it to get access to the back, and it'll be out of the way, and then run the hose down and then under the shelf here and over to the buckets under each printer. And the more I think about that, I think that's going to be the direction I'm going to go. But I've got to figure out what I'm going to do here. So let me do some noodling on that, and if I decide to design something here, I'll see if I can't figure out a way to show you my design process, and then we'll print it and put it up. So let me get back to you on that. Okay, well, that took all of about 5 seconds, because as soon as I shut off the camera, I realized I can put the hose up here and fix it in place and still have access behind, and then bring it all the way down and just turn it under there and mount the fan under that shelf like I was originally talking about. So that's the way we're going to go. Okay, guys, well, you're on the same side of the end of that shelf. You're just from a different angle, looking up from underneath now. So I realized one thing when I got to looking under it. I didn't take into account this cross member. So this cross member is going to limit my space from the end of that shelf over to here. And I don't think I'm going to have enough room to mount the fan directly to this and still be able to clear it with a hose. But there is, so this is the fan that I'm using, and this is the mounting plate here. And what I've got is some distance from the bottom of this mounting plate to the edge of that. I don't know if that's going to be enough to clear the rib here, but it's my best hope. I can always put a spacer block in here to space the fan down a little bit, if that's the way it works. But here's my airflow marker. So this is the exhaust side of the fan. So this has to be pointing towards you from where I'm here. So this will be mounted somewhere around here. And actually, I think that will work, at least from a space perspective. Now it'll be further over that away towards there when I actually mount it. So the hose will come in from the back side of the shelf off the side there, and then go over towards the printers. Let me get a little better position here, and I'll actually go ahead and hook this up. Okay, here's where things are going to start getting a little bit awkward. Let me be honest with you. I'm too lazy to run 10 minutes down the road to the local big box store to pick up some screws to do this installation with. So I went out to my garage shop and scrounged up what I could find that will work. And what I wound up with are 4 lag screws that are too long because the shelf is only 3/4 of an inch thick, and I've just got to go through this base plate here. Yeah, that's going to come out the top of the shelf into the bottom of my P2S, considering where it's sitting. So, I found a spacer block. So, I have 2 options. I can mount this to that with just some regular screws, and then mount this to the underside of the shelf with these. And between the thickness of this and the thickness of the shelf, these should not go through. But what I think I'm going to try and do, and I'm probably going to regret trying this, is just drilling a hole in the pattern of my mounting plate here. Through here, drill these out to clearance sizes, put this on under the shelf, and drill through this for starting holes for these. The biggest issue I have in trying to make all this work is that this base plate does not come off. If they'd made this removable so I could mount it and then attach the fan to it, that would have worked so much better. But instead, what they did was riveted it to these end pieces that might be removable. All right, maybe time to back up and see what we got going here. All right, give me a minute. Let me look into this, and we'll come back to this. Well, as you can see, it does come apart. So you can see the insides of that, just a little plastic impeller there, and the motor on this side with some directional vanes in there. And then this part is just the insides of these. This is the inside flow, so I'm assuming that's to smooth out the flow there, and then it blows out this side. So I got to make sure to get that back together when I do that, because the markings on this part, not on the motor. So the impeller is away from, on the opposite side. The impeller's on the intake side. So I've got to remember that when I go to mount it back up after I get it under the shelf. So this will give me access to the mounting holes, which is going to be a great benefit. So I may have to go and rethink my tool selection, and actually I might have to drill these holes out now that I look at them. These are a little bit big for that. I may be taking that drive after all. Now that I don't have to wrangle the whole motor, it'll be easier to mount. I might have the screws I need, and I won't need this spacer plate. So, okay, fall back again. Plan D. I found some basically 3/4 inch long screws with a wide flanged head on it. And I found 3 of those, and 1 3/4 inch lag screw. Since that's a 3/4 inch thick shelf, by the time I put a washer on this, plus the thickness of this base, it should not come through. So I'm going to start with this one. I'll drill a small pilot hole, maybe about a 1/2 inch deep, and then use this one to affix this to the underside of the shelf, and that'll give me holding power, and then I can run these 3 in to finish it up. I will have to open up one of the holes, I think, to get that to go in. Yeah, I'll open up one of these I mean, it will go in, but I'm afraid if it spins a little bit, it'll pull that base away from the shelf. So let me get repositioned and get under the shelf over there, and try and get the camera in a position and some lights in there where you can see what's going on. Otherwise, I'll just tell you about it after it's done. Okay, guys, we're repositioned under the shelf again, and this is the area I'm going to put the fan, and I want to mount it as close to this edge over here as I can. So first thing I'm going to do is, as soon as I find the fan housing, and knock the camera over. Yay. Okay, now that we got that fixed. So what I was saying is, put the fan over here, got the fan housing. Airflow is going that way. I want to put the fan as close to that edge as I can get it, and as far back. Well, going back is not as critical as getting as close to this edge as I can. So about a ½ inch off that right there is where I need a ½ inch pilot hole, and I've got a little piece of tape on there so I can stop before I go too deep. About a ½ inch should be plenty. A little bit of a pilot hole there. All right, put that up in that hole that I can't see if I'm in. There it goes. Just to make sure, feel up on top, make sure I did not come through, and I did not. Great. Good. I can take all that out because I'm, of course, still dropping stuff. And I'll put these other 3 screws in. They should not need pilot holes. Something like that. That should not go anywhere now. Give me a second. Let me get the fan motor. We'll put that up in there and get it mounted up. All right, now see if we can get these clips back up here, like so. And the motor fan should be going towards the intake side. It'll go up in here like this. Spread these apart a little more. Get that to set in there about so. Get these clips approximately back in place. Should go on fairly easily. Get these bolts and nuts started on here. Then all I should have to do is tighten them up. All right. I think that will work. All right, well, I think that was going to be the worst part of this whole installation, and it is now in the bag. So now we're going to start hooking up these hoses, and we'll start with this 2-inch or 2.5 inch coming off the back. Go ahead and get it slid onto there as best I can, and see if I can't get that done without blocking your view too much. I think I'm going to take it over here first. Let's see if I can't get it mounted on. This hose that I originally bought, it's fun to play with. It makes all kind of fun noises when you open and close it like that. But it is so stiff. It is actually hard to get it started. That wasn't too bad. Get that slid up under there and get that put in there. And of course, the poop chute come off the back of the printer. That should be easy to fix. So let me get that put back on, and then we'll start working on this 4-inch hose. All right, let me see if I can get in here and tie this up in this corner like I want to get it up out of the way. I may be not a lot of room in here, so I may be in the way of the camera, but shouldn't be too bad. Unfortunately, I don't have any zip ties that are long enough. So again, making do with what I have. That'll have to do. It'll be good. Then get you moved in here. You can see the fan right there. I gotta have enough hose here to come around the corner with enough to go over that edge right there. So I need to cut it about here. And I don't know if I'm gonna have enough hose to make the full length over to the H2C because it's on the other side of that shelf. But I do have some dust collection hose, 4-inch. I got a new section out in the shop. I bought 2 when I originally got my table saw and my dust collection fan, but I only used 1. So I'm hoping that that will be sufficient because it should be 4-inch if I remember right. That ought to be sufficient there. So I put a clamp on that end, and I already had a clamp on that end. So that should keep it from blowing back into the house. Okay, yeah, this little bit of hose here. What's left over after I cut off that one. Yeah, that's not going to do it. I'll save this though when I go and connect up the P2S. That'll be a good connection to go over to that Y adapter. So I can hook the 2 of them up. So, I'm out the shop and got my other piece of 4-inch. We're gonna get that cut. I think that's okay. Ooh, this one's a bit harder than the other one. Yeah, a little bit in there, but we'll live with that. And this is going to be the fun part. I'm not going to put a hose clamp on this end. I don't think I'm going to need it. I'm going to work at this for a minute, probably off camera, get this last connection made, and then we'll work on seeing if I can get the airflow where I want it in the H2C. So hold on, we'll be back in a minute. Okay, well, got the hoses connected. It's in there, about where I wanted it in there, but I have come to realize that that can is too light, and the weight of the hoses tends to want to push it over. So that might have to be addressed in the future. But right now I've got it balanced, I guess. It's not falling over. And so we're going to plug in the fan, get it pulling, and see what we can do. Okay. Got everything connected down below. I've got power run. I've temporarily brought the control panel over here beside the H2C. I run the cables under the shelf. I've just got it temporarily zip tied up here, and that'll work for right now. I'm going to design and 3D print a different thing. I might do a whole video on that, showing my design process in Fusion 360 on that. So if you're interested, make sure to subscribe. I'll be posting that video here in the next week or so. Well, I say that, but life. Anyway, I've got it up here and I've got it running. You can see it's got a display on showing 61 degrees in here. And one thing about this is that I believe this fan was made for greenhouses, and it comes with a temperature probe. And as far as I've been able to tell, it has to be plugged into this control panel for it to function at all. If you unplug it, all you get is an error message. So, and if anyone knows any better than that in the comments, please leave me a comment and tell me if there's a setting in here I can go change so that I can unplug this and get it out of the way. It'd be greatly appreciated. I have, off camera, done a little bit of testing with it. And in the back of the H2C, there are some open grates. And as long as the fans are set to heating, even if it's not printing and it's not actually heating the chamber, if it's set to heating, it will close the vents the same way as it would if it was running a high temperature material. So I was able to run the fan and with the piece of paper laid up on those grates, and I will put some B-roll of me doing it so you can see that as long as the fan is on, it will hold that piece of paper up against those that grill, the holes in the back, all the way down to setting number 1. It will hold that piece of paper up there. So I know it's keeping a negative pressure inside the thing all the way at the lowest setting, which may be too much airflow. And I don't have any option to run it any lower without turning it off. The fan has a setting of 1 to 10, and on setting 1, which is its lowest, it still holds the piece of paper to the back. So we know we're getting plenty of negative pressure inside the machine. But what I don't know is if it's pulling too much air, pull the temperature down in the chamber when you're trying to run a heated chamber. So I'm going to set the chamber for right now to 40 degrees Celsius. We'll make sure this is off. It's actually been running on 1 this whole time. So it's at 40. I've got it on. Let me get you over here so you can see this. But the chamber's coming up to temperature. We're at 24 degrees now. I'm going to let it come up and settle in at 40. And then I'm going to turn the fan on and see what happens. So I'm going to shut the camera off and maybe bring the tripod over so it's a little steadier. And when it gets back up to 40 degrees, I'll bring you back. Okay, well, that was interesting. It was taking a while for the chamber to heat up. It was heating, but it was doing it slowly. So I thought, well, I'll heat up the heat bed too, and that'll help bring up the chamber temperature. Well, as soon as I started the heat bed going, the chamber temperature started coming down. Even though it was still set on 40, everything still indicated that it was trying to get to 40 degrees. But apparently, when the heat bed is on and the chamber heater is on, the printer will prioritize the heat bed first which makes sense. That's more critical to printing. And the chamber temperature dropped nearly 10 degrees Celsius. It was up near 35 when I turned on the heat bed, and it dropped down to upper 20s, almost 20 degrees Celsius. So, yeah, something to keep in mind. But after the heat bed got to temperature, the chamber started coming back up to temperature, and now it is setting at a comfortable 41 degrees Celsius. So I'm going to turn the fan on, and since I know all I need to get a negative pressure is level 1, we're going to turn it on 1. Let the fan come up to speed. Okay, it's indicating that it is running at level 1, and we'll watch the chamber temperature. I'm going to let it run for a little bit. We'll fast forward through it, see if anything changes. So that was at least 5 or 6 minutes, and it doesn't seem to be having any trouble keeping up at 40 degrees with the heat bed on. And there's no sense testing it without the heat bed on, because anytime you're printing anything, the heat bed will be on. In fact, for most of those materials, the heat bed's going to be even hotter than that. I'm not sure what the chamber temperature recommended for ABS is, but somewhere between 40 and 60, I'm sure. Well, let's bump it up to 60 and see what happens. Okay, that took about 13 minutes. And you'll notice that the chamber heat actually turned itself off when the temperature reached about 57. And then just with the heat bed and residual heat, it continued to climb into 60. So I had the fan turned back off, the exhaust fan turned back off while that was heating up. So I'm going to turn it back on to setting 1, and we'll see if anything changes. Now, just for reference, the current temperature in here is 62 degrees Fahrenheit in my basement right now. I'd have to do the math in my head to see what that is in Celsius. In post, I'll figure that out, and I'll post it on the screen here. Okay, that's been about 5 minutes, and you can see it fluctuating slightly between 59 and 60, and it did not show that the chamber heater came back on, at least not to a high enough level that it would indicate. And it may be on at a low level just to maintain temperature, but I think the fan set on setting 1 is going to produce enough of a negative pressure inside the machine to exhaust all the gases that are produced during 3D printing, while not seriously affecting the ability of the machine to maintain the selected temperature inside the chamber. Now, those fluctuations you see could be caused simply by heat escaping through the glass top or the sides. This isn't exactly an insulated box. It's just a piece of glass on top and plastic sidewalls. So it's not like it's very well insulated at all, which makes me wonder why it's not, since it is supposed to be able to maintain a chamber temperature, has a heater in it. I think that should be something Bamboo Labs ought to look into. A little foam insulation in certain spots and maybe an alternate top instead of the glass top, maybe a double wall panel that you could put in place of the glass top to hold in some of that heat. It'd be a little more efficient. But Bamboo Labs, if you're watching, maybe you ought to think about that. But I think I'm going to call this a successful installation, and we can get on to some ABS printing now. All right, guys, thanks for stopping by. Like and subscribe, and we will see you on the next one.